You're really going to drink that in front of me? Adisa's voice cut through the air like a blade, hoarse with exhaustion and outrage. Bako brought the cup to his lips without answering, his eyes avoiding hers. The sweet, comforting aroma of the tea filled the room, heavy with heat. The liquid slid down his throat like a silent relief as his wife watched him with a mix of disbelief and fear. That woman is poisoning you, Bako. Don't you see it? Adisa took a shaky step forward, one hand on the wall for support. Sweat trickled down her forehead. Her heavy belly revealed 7 months of pregnancy and the growing weight of distrust inside her. Bako slowly rose from the armchair, holding the cup firmly as if it were a shield. You're delirious, Adisa. You're just tired, that's all. Aisha's been helping us. She takes care of the house, the girls, the food. Don't you see that? I see it, she shouted, her voice ripping with pain and frustration. I see how you look at her, how the girls stop listening to me, even you. You're not the same anymore. This food, this tea. She went quiet for a moment, swaying. A sudden nausea surged like a wave. The heat in the room felt suffocating, the walls closing in. Bako rushed toward her and tried to hold her, but she pushed his hand away. Don't touch me, she murmured, eyes glistening. You brought evil into this house. Adisa dropped to her knees on the floor, gasping, one hand clutching her belly. A low moan escaped her lips. What is it? Bako knelt beside her, finally afraid. Is it pain? She didn't answer, just moaned, eyes wide with panic. Aisha! Bako shouted. Call the hospital, now! But Aisha was already there, silent at the doorway, as if she had seen it all coming. Her dark, unmoving eyes stared at the woman on the floor with a strange glint of restraint. Then she turned on her heel to get the phone, moving with an unsettling calm. The time between the call and the ambulance's arrival was a blur. Adisa screamed in pain the entire ride. Blood, heat, violent contractions. Bako, confused and desperate, felt torn in opposite directions, between fear for his wife and the cold comfort of Aisha's gaze, which followed him even inside the ambulance, seated quietly in the back without saying a word. At the hospital, the corridor smelled of alcohol and tension. Doctors rushed to attend to Adisa, who was no longer responsive. Bako stood frozen at the door to the operating room, his hands trembling, the teacup still in his mind. The sweet taste lingered on his tongue like a perverse memory. Hours passed, or minutes. Time had lost all meaning. Aisha stood beside him, silent, unshakable. He couldn't look directly at her, but he didn't move away either. It's going to be okay, she said with a small smile, her hand gently touching his arm. You're strong. Before Bako could reply, the door opened. A doctor, weary-faced, approached with the expression no man ever wants to see. I'm sorry. The ground disappeared. Bako felt the world spin. A dull hum muffled the sounds around him. The doctor kept talking, but the words were a blur. Infection, premature labor, hemorrhage. They didn't make it. Adisa, the baby, gone. He didn't cry at first. He stood silent, still. Aisha wrapped her arms around him like she'd been waiting for him there, in that exact moment, her body fit against his with a familiarity that didn't feel new. It was as if she had always belonged there. And then, finally, Bako cried, not out of love, not out of guilt. He cried because he had fallen, because in some dark way he knew. The woman in his arms was now the mistress of the house. They're gone, he murmured between sobs. Aisha held him in silence. When he lifted his face, she was staring straight ahead, as if seeing something he could not. We'll get through this. Together, she whispered. A deep sigh escaped her lips. Then, a faint smile, barely visible, began to form. I'm pregnant too, Bako. The silence that followed was absolute. He stared at her, eyes bloodshot, heart pounding in his throat. What had she just said? pregnant, by her. The image of his dead wife in the operating room exploded in his mind like thunder. The room, the argument, the tea, everything came rushing back. And now, there in this woman's arms, another life was growing. Another woman carried his child. But something was wrong. Something cold and ancient in Aisha's eyes, as if all of this death, pain, destruction had been necessary, as if it had all been foreseen. She stood up, leaving him there, broken. "I'll wait in the car," she said calmly. "You need to rest." He didn't respond. He stayed where he was, staring at his own hands, as if searching for some trace of purity that had long since abandoned him. Outside, in the darkness of the hospital parking lot, Aisha got into the car with serenity. She ran a hand over her still flat belly with maternal firmness. She smiled. Inside that womb, there wasn't just a child. There was the continuation of what had begun with a plate of food on the street. There was power, ruin, legacy, and no one left in the way. The fork slipped from his hand with a dull clink against the concrete floor. Bako leaned back on the makeshift wooden bench, eyes half closed, his stomach awash in a nearly intoxicating satisfaction. The food stall buzzed around him, sounds of frying, dishes being hastily washed, orders shouted over smoke and heat. But none of that mattered. "Would you like some more?" Her voice reached him gently, slightly hoarse, as if it drifted through the steam of the thick broth bubbling behind the counter. He looked up. Aisha, the woman from the street food stall. Her hair wrapped in a colorful scarf, dark skin glistening with sweat, eyes that gleamed with a knowing that felt too deep. Her simple dress clung to her from hours near the fire, but there was never anything vulgar about her. Her scent didn't come from bottles. It came from ginger, roasted garlic, herbs ground in a mortar. "Just a little more, Aisha," Bako murmured, his gaze dazed. "That sauce of yours, it's out of this world." She smiled, and it wasn't just politeness. It was like a secret being shared. People say that, you know, that once they try it, they can never stop. Bako chuckled, rubbing his already full belly. "You're going to get me hooked." Aisha only raised an eyebrow and turned to prepare another plate, like she'd heard it 100 times before. For the past 3 months, he had stopped by almost every day. Even with his office on the other side of the city, he always found a way to take a detour. Sometimes he'd say he needed to check on a broken taxi. Other times, he claimed he just needed to get some air. But the truth was simple. He couldn't go without that food anymore. The fish stews, the spiced rice, the heavy broths served in clay bowls. Everything tasted better than anything he'd ever eaten. And over time, it wasn't just the food pulling him back. It was Aisha. Her presence, her voice, her muffled laugh while chopping vegetables, the way she touched customers' shoulders when serving, casual but intentional. He remembered the first time he'd stopped there, on a muggy day after a rough morning at work. He was starving and annoyed. He saw the crowded stall, heard someone mention the best chicken broth in town. He stepped in without thinking much, walked away, changed. He returned the next day, and the day after, and the day after that. At home, things were different. Adisa was exhausted. Their 2 small children took all her time and energy, and the pregnancy with their third only made things worse. The nights were restless, the house always messy, dinners too simple, if there was dinner at all. "I just need some help," she had said one night, sitting on the edge of the bed, eyes sunken from fatigue. "Just for a little while. Just until the baby comes." "Help?" Bako replied, eyes still on the TV. "You mean you want a maid?" "A cook. Someone who can take care of the house too, if possible, just so I can rest a bit." He said nothing. That night, Aisha crossed his mind for the first time outside of mealtimes. She could cook. She was efficient, discreet, and trustworthy as far as he could tell. The next morning, back at the stall, he mentioned, "My wife is pregnant. It's getting hard for her to manage everything. I'm thinking about hiring someone who can really cook." "Is that so?" Aisha replied, stirring a pot with calculated slowness. "Running a house, that's not for everyone. It takes more than strength. You have to know how to make the house obey." Bako frowned. "What do you mean?" "A house is like a body. If you don't know how to feed it, you don't know how to command it. You need to know what to put in the mouth, the air, the eyes. Only then does it listen." He smiled, thinking it was a curious metaphor. "You talk like a witch." She didn't laugh. She simply looked at him directly. Anyone who truly cooks well is a bit of a witch. The offer left his mouth before he even realized it. "Would you be interested? Working at the house for a few months. Could just be part-time, until the baby comes." Aisha pretended to think for a moment. "If the pay is good, I might try." And so she entered their home. The first day was met with awkwardness. The girls were curious about the new auntie. Adisa looked at her with a suspicion she tried to mask with politeness. "Make yourself at home, Aisha. The kitchen's yours. But let me know if you need anything." "I always do," she replied, her tone ambiguous. The days that followed were marked by subtle changes. The food at home had flavor again, not the simple taste from before, but something deeper that made you want seconds. Even Adisa admitted it, at first. "This fish stew, it's like the one from that street place you eat at, isn't it?" she remarked one tired evening. "Yeah, Aisha's really good." The girls, once picky and fussy, started licking their plates clean. They began following Aisha around the house, asking how she made everything if they could help. Aisha let them chop herbs, stir pots. She taught them strange little songs while cooking, songs with an old rhythm, words Adisa didn't recognize. "What are you teaching them?" she asked one afternoon, hearing the girls humming in unison. "Just some tunes from my grandma. They bring peace into the kitchen." But Adisa didn't feel peace. She felt a growing unease. Aisha's presence spread like her cooking scent, intense, persistent, clinging to curtains, furniture, clothes. And then the first signs came. One of the living room vases fell in the middle of the night. No reason. The girls began having strange dreams. They talked in their sleep. The youngest woke up crying, saying the lady on the wall wanted to sing to her. Adisa started having headaches, nausea, even outside the pregnancy, a chill that crept in every time she stepped into the kitchen. She tried talking to Bako. "You need to see what's going on. She's different. There's something about her." "You're just tired, Adisa," he said, already irritated. "You're seeing things. It's not that. The girls are changing. The house is changing." He only sighed, got up from the chair, and walked into the kitchen. There, Aisha was waiting with a steaming cup of tea in her hands. "For the nerves," she said, placing the cup in his hands. "Fatigue of the house and of the soul." Bako drank, like always, and Adisa, watching from the doorway, felt her heart tighten. In that moment, without realizing it, the house was no longer hers. "Is she sleeping here tonight?" asked the youngest daughter, holding a piece of cake in her small hands, her wide eyes fixed on her father. Bako glanced toward Aisha, who was quietly laughing in the kitchen while drying her hands with a cloth. It was late afternoon, the sunlight filtering through the living room curtains, bathing everything in gold. The house smelled of cinnamon, melted butter, and something else, something nameless that clung to the nostrils like ancient incense. "She is, sweetheart, just for tonight. Her house is having an issue with the electricity," he answered, smiling without much enthusiasm. The girl nodded and went back to eating her cake. Across the room, her older sister was helping Aisha arrange containers on the counter as if it were part of the routine. Adisa watched from the hallway doorway, one hand resting on her belly, the other on the doorframe. The heat had returned full force that day, and the constant heaviness in her legs and back felt even worse since the cook had started staying over. At first, Aisha came only during the day, but over the past few weeks, the excuses to spend the night had multiplied. A heavy rain, a problem with the neighbor, a leak in the sink of her small room. And each time she stayed, it was as if she left another part of herself in the house. A forgotten blanket on the sofa, a bottle of perfume in the bathroom, a pair of slippers at the foot of the guest bed. Adisa tried not to show it, but the discomfort grew inside her like a thorn under the skin. "Where are my gold earrings?" she asked one morning, rummaging through the nightstand drawer. "You probably put them somewhere else," Bako replied without looking up from the newspaper. "No, I always leave them here. Did you touch them?" "Of course not." She didn't press the issue, but the unease didn't leave her. Aisha's presence was subtle and constant. In the morning, the house would already be filled with the scent of brewed coffee and bread baking in the oven. The girls would rush excitedly to the kitchen, where the cook awaited with a maternal smile. She braided their hair before school, sang songs from another time, whispered things Adisa couldn't hear, but that made the girls laugh, as if they were being enchanted. And maybe they were. Adisa began noticing the details. How the older daughter spent more time with Aisha than with her. How the younger one preferred to sit on the cook's lap to hear stories. How both of them stopped calling for mommy when they got hurt or scared. It was Auntie Aisha who came running, who kissed the scrapes, who made them laugh again. "They're getting too attached to her," she mentioned to Bako one night in bed. "Isn't that a good thing? You're always saying you need help. Help isn't replacement." He sighed, turning to the other side. "Are you jealous?" "It's not jealousy. It's instinct." She went quiet for a while, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "Can't you feel how different the house is? Things go missing. The air changes. Sometimes I hear voices, like someone praying in the hallway at night. It's the baby. You're just tired." But Adisa knew it wasn't just fatigue. One night she got up to go to the bathroom and saw a faint light coming from the kitchen. She walked there silently, step by step. As she approached, she heard whispers. Turning the corner, she saw Aisha kneeling in front of the unlit stove, eyes closed, hands resting on a cloth embroidered with strange symbols. She murmured words in a language Adisa didn't recognize. When she noticed her presence, Aisha stood up abruptly, as if nothing had happened. "I had a nightmare," she said calmly. "Came to make some tea." "What was that on the floor?" "A scarf. I'm afraid of the dark. It protects me." Adisa didn't believe her, but she had no proof and couldn't accuse her. The next morning, she noticed one of the hallway plants had withered, even though it had been watered every day. The living room windows creaked even without wind. The water from the filter tasted odd. The landline phone rang and then went dead. Small signs, but they all pointed to the same thing. Something had been wrong in that house since Aisha entered it. One afternoon, while trying to sew a baby outfit, she heard laughter coming from the yard. She looked out the window. Her daughters were playing with Aisha. Strange games. Their eyes were blindfolded, spinning in circles while Aisha spoke in rhythmic phrases, like a chant, like a spell. Adisa immediately got up from her chair and went outside. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to sound firm. "It's a northern game. They say it protects against the evil eye," Aisha replied casually. "No one needs that here. Every home needs protection." The girls looked from their mother to the cook, confused by the tension. Adisa called them inside. They hesitated, obeyed reluctantly. That night, Bako came home late. He was carrying a package. "I brought this for you," he said, handing the gift to Aisha. She opened it, revealing a new apron embroidered with her name. "It's beautiful," she said, her eyes meeting Adisa's for a brief moment. "Now I feel like part of the house." Adisa stood from the table without a word. She climbed the stairs slowly, swallowing the lump in her throat. In the bedroom, she cried in silence. Her husband was no longer hers. Neither were her daughters. The house had been taken, not by the hands of an ordinary thief, but by something more insidious, a presence that settled into the cracks of daily life, that rooted itself in the food, the words, the small gestures. She fell asleep with her hand on her belly, as if she could protect the child yet to come. But in the dark outside the room, Sisha watched through the gap in the cracked door, and her smile was a whisper in the hallway. Adisa dropped the spoon to the floor with a metallic clang. The sound echoed through the silent kitchen, mingling with the clink of the porcelain she still held in her hands. A sharp pain sliced through her abdomen like a hot blade, making her instinctively curl over her belly. She gasped, trying to hide it, but the sweat beading on her forehead betrayed any attempt at composure. "Are you all right?" asked Aisha, appearing in the kitchen doorway, as if she already knew. Adisa looked up with effort. The cook's shadow against the hallway light seemed larger than normal, its edges blurred, almost alive. She tried to respond but only managed a nod, bracing herself on the sink. "Probably just tired," she murmured, her voice faltering. "Sit down. I'll make you some tea," Aisha offered, already stepping closer. "No, I don't want your tea anymore." Aisha stopped, her gaze locked onto hers. "As you wish," she replied softly. "But you need to take care of yourself. The baby needs you." Adisa sat down with difficulty, her heart racing, hands trembling slightly. The pain came in waves, accompanied by an inner chill no blanket could warm. Lately, the symptoms had worsened. Unexplained pains, sudden weakness, a constant sensation that something was crawling inside her. Doctors found nothing serious. Blood pressure, tests, everything normal. But she knew. Her body spoke. Something inside her was unraveling, and it had a name: Aisha. In the following days, the pain intensified. Adisa stayed in her room more, lying down, trying to conserve what little strength remained. Walking through the house became increasingly difficult, the heat unbearable. The smell of food, once comforting, now made her nauseous. The family, however, carried on as if everything was perfectly normal. Bako no longer slept beside her at night. He stayed in the guest room, claiming her snoring, bathroom trips, and pregnancy discomforts were disrupting his sleep. She didn't argue. She had no strength left for confrontations. The girls hardly came to see her. When they did, it was reluctantly, sent with a message or a request from her mother, who visited occasionally. When they went back downstairs, the laughter resumed. Cheerful voices, the sound of light footsteps running down the hall, always around Aisha. One afternoon, Adisa tried to get up for water and her legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, bracing herself on the nightstand. Her breathing was labored, her eyes filled with tears. She heard footsteps. "Aisha, need help?" "No." "I can carry you back to bed. Get out of my room." Aisha didn't respond right away. She simply watched, her face expressionless, no smugness, no rush. Then she turned and walked out, leaving the door slightly open. Alone, Adisa dragged herself back into bed. That night she tried to talk to Bako. He came into the room to grab a shirt, and she seized the moment. "I'm getting worse. Every day, and you don't see it." He hesitated, shirt in hand. "You just need to rest, Adisa. That's all. She's doing something. There's something wrong with that woman." "Enough," he said, using a tone he rarely used. "You're being paranoid. She takes care of the house, the girls, of me. And she's done all that while you've been pulling away from everything. I'm pulling away because I'm sick, because this house is killing me. Don't you feel it? He closed his eyes for a moment, impatient. I'm not going to throw out someone who's been helpful just because you're jealous. Aisha's here to help. You really believe that's why she's here? Enough, Adisa. I'm not discussing this right now. He left, slamming the door. Adisa remained alone with her pain and her certainty. The next morning, she refused breakfast. Aisha came upstairs with a tray, mint tea, cornbread, fruit cut into heart shapes. Adisa pushed the tray away. I told you I don't want anything from you. Aisha didn't take offense. She placed the tray on the dresser and stepped closer. You're losing strength. If this keeps up, you'll lose the baby. You want me to lose it. Don't say that. You think I don't know. You poison this house. You poison everything you touch, even the girls. Aisha smiled, a soft, almost sorrowful smile. Children know who truly loves them. You don't love anyone. You feed on other people's misery. I only fill the spaces I'm given. The words cut deeper than any shout. Adisa turned her face away, fighting back tears. When she looked again, the tray was gone. So was Aisha. Later that day, as she tried to go downstairs, she felt a violent dizziness. The steps wavered beneath her feet. She clutched the railing with all her strength. A bead of sweat slid down her temple. The world spun. She woke up hours later in her bed, covered. The girls were playing in the hallway. Aisha was humming faintly in the kitchen. Adisa closed her eyes. The baby kicked inside her as if begging for help, as if it wanted to escape the womb that was no longer a shelter, but a battlefield. At the end of that week, she tried to eat. Aisha served her a plate of rice and meat, well-seasoned, aromatic, but something was off. The smell was too sweet, the color slightly dark. Adisa took a spoonful and tasted metal. She spat it out immediately. What is this? Rice with liver. Good for the blood. This is bad. It tastes like iron. Maybe it's your palate. She rose from the table, ignoring the dizziness. You want to kill me. If I did, I'd have done it already. Adisa's stomach turned. She climbed the stairs, trembling, breathless. She lay down and cried in silence. Night fell over the house like a leaden blanket. In the darkness, Adisa heard the whispers again, thin voices, a sound like fingernails scratching the wall. The baby twisted inside her. Her belly stretched more than normal. The pain came in waves, like tiny knives turning within her. She could feel it. She was being erased, and no one seemed to care. The pillowcase was soaked with cold sweat when Adisa tried to sit up in bed and couldn't. Her breathing came short and ragged, as if the air itself had gained weight. Morning light filtered through the cracks in the window, but it brought more anguish than relief. She tried to call for help, but her voice came out as a hoarse whisper, nearly drowned out by the slow whirring of the ceiling fan. The pain that had started deep in her lower back was spreading, pulsing down her legs as if her own flesh were being peeled away. She felt her belly contract with force, and in a moment of clarity, she understood. It wasn't just pain. It was something more, a sign, a dark warning. The door creaked open slowly. You're awake, said Aisha, entering the room with a damp cloth in her hands. Adisa tried to turn, but even the attempt brought another wave of pain. Help! Me? She whispered, desperate. You're already being helped, Aisha replied, stepping closer with her usual calm. She wet the cloth and pressed it to the pregnant woman's forehead. You're burning up, she murmured, with what sounded like barely hidden satisfaction. Call the doctor. Beko already left for work. He didn't say anything about calling anyone. Adisa widened her eyes, trying to reach for the phone on the nightstand. Aisha saw it, reached first, and slid the device into the pocket of her apron without taking her eyes off the woman lying helpless in bed. You need rest, she said with a falsely sweet tone. Your body is adjusting. That afternoon, Bako got a call from the school. The girls had fevers and were unusually sleepy. Nothing serious, they said, but enough to send them home. He sighed, hung up and returned. Aisha already knew. She was sitting in the living room with the girls, offering a dark broth in a steaming bowl. Just a tea to bring the fever down, she explained with a smile. Nothing their mummy couldn't take too. He went upstairs to check on Adisa. He found her lying there, her face drawn, eyes sunken. You look terrible. Take them away from her. Please. You have to stop this, Adisa. She's doing something to us, to me, to them. Enough, he said, backing away annoyed. I'll call a doctor if I have to, but that's enough of this paranoia. That night, Bako slept in the guest room. Aisha was waiting for him. Without resistance, without words, he lay beside her. As if everything had already been written, he accepted her presence as inevitable. As if the desire guiding him was no longer his own, but a force outside him, one he couldn't control. The next morning, the girls ran through the house looking for Aisha. Where's Mommy? Asked the eldest. She's resting, sweethearts. Let's let her be quiet upstairs. Are you going to be our new Mommy? The youngest asked. Aisha chuckled softly, kneeling to their height. Only if you really, really want me to be. The youngest nodded eagerly. The eldest hesitated for a moment, then smiled too. The days that followed were marked by silence and distance. Adisa could no longer get out of bed. She'd lost weight. Her face seemed to have shrunk. Doctors admitted her to the hospital, suspecting a severe infection. Her body wasn't responding to treatment. Tests showed nothing conclusive. The baby was still there, but in distress. The hospital was too white, too cold. The lights bothered her eyes. But there, for the first time in a long while, she could breathe without smelling Aisha's food, without hearing her songs, without seeing the shadows crawling through the corners of the house. One night, a nurse entered with a bowl of soup. It was sent by a family friend, she said, placing the bowl on the side table. Adisa turned pale. Who sent it? A woman, slim, with a headscarf, said she was a close friend of the family. Adisa shoved the soup away, the thick liquid spilling onto the blanket. Take it away! The nurse was startled, tried to clean up, but Adisa insisted she didn't want to eat, didn't want to drink. She just wanted to survive. Meanwhile, at home, Aisha filled the spaces with ease. The wall pictures had been rearranged. An old wedding photo of Bako and Adisa had vanished. The couch pillowcases had been changed. A new incense burned at dusk, leaving the house with a sweet, nauseating aroma. The girls had started sleeping with her in the guest room, now transformed into the new master bedroom. The double bed, her clothes in the closet, her toothbrush beside Bako's. One night, while brushing the eldest daughter's hair, she whispered, "Soon you'll have a baby brother, and he'll grow up here with you. What about Mommy? Mommy needs to rest for a long time." At the hospital, the baby's heartbeat started to fluctuate. The doctor called Bako urgently. "She's gone into premature labor. We're trying to stabilize things, but her blood pressure has spiked. There's risk for both of them." He signed forms, waited in the hallway, sweating cold. Aisha appeared shortly after, her eyes calm. She sat beside him and held his hand. "What's meant to happen will happen." He didn't respond. Hours later, a doctor came out, his expression grim. "We did everything we could. The world seemed to stop. The baby didn't make it, and she didn't either." The cry came dry. Then came the scream. Bako collapsed to his knees, inconsolable. Aisha knelt beside him, as she had once before. She touched his back, cradled his face. But her eyes were not sad. They were serene, like someone watching a seed finally sprout. Bako's desperate scream echoed through the hospital hallways like an ancestral lament. He collapsed to his knees on the cold floor, hands over his face, eyes overflowing. The nurses exchanged glances. Some paused for a moment, but none approached. His grief burned silently, consuming everything around him. Behind him, seated on the waiting room bench, Aisha watched with steady, expressionless eyes, her arms crossed over her belly. The doctor tried to console him, offering empty words that dripped like water over stone. "We did everything we could. She arrived in critical condition. Rapid infection. The baby was too fragile." But none of it made sense. Nothing she said could erase what he had just lost. Adisa, his child. The future he had once imagined, reduced to a pair of folded sheets and a hastily signed document. Aisha stood slowly. Her footsteps echoed firm and calm on the polished floor. She stopped behind Bako, knelt down with poise, and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. "She went in peace," she whispered into his ear, as if she had seen it happen with her own eyes. He didn't resist her touch. He let himself be held. He was weak, lost. "Why?" he murmured between sobs. "Why did this have to happen?" Aisha cradled him like a child. Her voice was a warm poison. "Fate only takes what needs to be replaced." So 2 days later, Adisa's body was buried in the family cemetery on a cloudy morning, surrounded by a few relatives and neighbors. The daughters were there, holding their father's hand, but it was Aisha who stood out among them, wearing a simple black dress and a light veil over her hair. Whispers passed between guests. "Is she the maid? She's pregnant too. She's living in the house now." Bako heard none of it. His mind was filled with a constant hum, a silent pressure that pushed him toward Aisha whenever he tried to pull away. That night, back at home, he sat in the living room armchair, the same one where he had so often sipped her tea. Silence surrounded him. The girls were asleep upstairs, and the house felt different. Not cold, not warm, just empty of Adisa. Aisha entered the room barefoot, her hair down. "You need to eat," she said, placing a tray on the coffee table. "You're getting too weak." He didn't respond. She sat beside him carefully. Her fingers found his, intertwining them slowly. "I'm pregnant," she announced, her voice low, controlled, but firm. Bako turned to her slowly. "What? Pregnant? With your child?" He didn't say anything, just stared. The news seemed to dissolve into the grief, the guilt, the exhaustion, a storm of emotions he could no longer name. "You don't have to say anything now. Just let me take care of you," Aisha added. And he let her. In the days that followed, the changes intensified. Without realizing it, Bako watched as Aisha began assuming the role of full-time wife. She was the first to wake. She bathed the girls, packed their school bags, prepared breakfast. She organized the bills, answered the phone, coordinated the taxi fleet when Bako couldn't get out of bed. The first time someone called her Lady of the House was a mistake, a delivery man with groceries. Aisha just smiled and thanked him, accepting the bags with natural ease. The name stuck. Within 2 weeks, all the staff were referring to her as Mrs. Aisha. Bako didn't object. One night, while sorting out inheritance papers and insurance policies left behind by Adisa, he signed a power of attorney granting Aisha full authority over bank accounts, property deals, and asset management. By the time he realized what he'd done, it was too late. But he didn't protest. She was pregnant. That's what he told himself. That's what he needed to believe. The new routine settled in like a river carving its bed. Aisha redecorated the house with different pictures, rearranged the furniture, changed the curtains. The living room was repainted. Adisa's old bedroom was cleared out, her clothes donated, her presence erased with surgical precision. One morning, Aisha entered Bako's room with an envelope in hand. I'm thinking of hosting a blessing ceremony when the baby turns 4 months. A blessing ceremony. It's more spiritual than a baby shower, part of my lineage. It strengthens the child in the womb. He just nodded. And the girls? He asked. They're already used to me. They trust me. And you? She looked at him deeply. I'm your new wife, Bako. You already knew that. He didn't answer. He only looked away. That afternoon, the daughters were sitting on the living room rug, drawing. The youngest sketched a house with 3 people, herself, her sister, and Aisha. Bako wasn't there. Neither was Adisa. The house in the drawing was dark, but flowers rose from the chimney. Aisha looked at it, smiled, kissed the little girl on the forehead, and tucked the drawing into the nightstand drawer in the master bedroom. That night, before bed, she looked into the mirror, gently caressing her now slightly rounded belly. Everything is as it should be, she murmured to her reflection, and she smiled, a slow smile, a smile full of certainty. The glass slipped from Bako's hand and shattered on the kitchen floor, sending juice and shards in every direction. Aisha heard the crash from the other side of the house and appeared almost instantly, not startled, just slightly disappointed. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice low, almost tender. Bako bent down with difficulty to try to pick up the pieces, but his hand was trembling. The pain in his lower back radiated like an electric shock, and sweat soaked the back of his neck. He exhaled sharply, sat in the nearest chair, and wiped his face. "My vision's blurry again," he murmured, not looking at her. "There's this metallic taste in my mouth, and my body feels like I'm carrying lead." Aisha approached with a cloth and began to clean the shards, kneeling with her usual grace. Her movements were almost choreographed. "You need to rest. You're wearing yourself down. Work, obligations, grief." "I'm not grieving," he replied, strained. "I'm sick." "That's why I'm here. To take care of you," she said, standing and gently brushing his shoulder. "Just trust me." Over the past few days, Bako's body had begun to fail, subtly at first, then more and more. It started with joint pain, followed by sudden dizziness. His fingers were always cold, and his skin, once warm and vibrant, now showed grayish blotches under his eyes. Doctors gave vague answers. Fatigue, low blood pressure, maybe anemia. But nothing helped. His taxi fleet, once his empire, no longer saw him walking the office halls. He signed documents without reading them, spent hours sitting on the porch staring at nothing, his eyes searching for something he no longer knew how to name. Staff began turning to Aisha for everyday decisions. She, always polite, answered kindly, but there was steel in her posture. "Could you review the new co-op contract?" asked one of the managers. "Of course. Leave it on my desk. I'll handle it today," she'd reply, her hand resting protectively over her belly like it was a charm. As Bako's strength faded, hers grew. But trapped in a fog of weakness and guilt, he seemed incapable of pushing back. One afternoon he tried playing with the girls in the garden. He invited them to fly a kite like they used to. The youngest ignored him. The oldest only shook her head, unenthusiastic. "Mommy said today we're making clay dolls. She's gonna teach us," said the little one, pointing at Aisha on the porch. Bako felt a pang in his chest that had nothing to do with illness. "She's not your mom," he said without thinking. The girl frowned, confused. "She said she is now." He didn't reply, just sat down in the grass, breathless. He felt dizzy. The trees spun. The kite slipped from his hand and flew away. That night, lying in bed, he had a disturbing dream. Adisa stood at the bedroom door, dressed in white, her belly swollen, hands bloody. She stared unblinking, her eyes hollow. Behind her, Aisha emerged from the shadows, fused to the walls, whispering words that couldn't be heard, but could be felt. When he woke, he was drenched in sweat, shaking. The bed beside him was empty. Aisha wasn't there. He heard faint murmuring from the kitchen. He rose with effort and descended the stairs, his feet heavy as lead. He saw Aisha from behind, in front of the unlit stove, whispering again, her hands pressed to a cloth marked with strange symbols. "What are you doing?" His voice came out rough, unexpectedly firm. Aisha turned slowly. "Praying for your health. That's not a prayer. Is that what you think you saw? I want to know what's happening to me. I want to know what you're doing to me." She stepped closer, her face serene. "I saved you from a woman who was dragging you to death. I gave you a second chance. I gave you a child. Everything I've done was for you. Then why am I dying?" She didn't answer, just stared, eyes dark and deep. "You're not dying. You're paying the price." He staggered backward, stunned by the coldness of her words. The next day, he contacted a lawyer, tried to schedule a meeting to review wills, assets, but he couldn't finish the call. He had a sudden shortness of breath halfway through. The driver brought him back home. Aisha greeted him at the gate. "You shouldn't have gone out alone. I need to go over my papers, my company." "You already did. You took care of everything. It's all in my name, remember?" He tried to object, but couldn't form the words. Only murmurs escaped his mouth. He was carried to bed. Aisha gave him a dark tea. "This will calm you down." He drank it. After that came the quietest days of his life. His body, now nearly immobile, was dragged from bed to chair. He could no longer feed himself. Aisha fed him with slow spoonfuls. His daughters rarely came to see him. When they did, they looked afraid of what he had become. The youngest once asked, "Did Daddy turn into a doll?" On his last lucid day, Bako managed to scrawl a shaky sentence on a scrap of paper and hide it under the mattress. "She took everything from me. Be careful with her." He would never know if anyone would find it. That night, he dreamed of Adisa again. This time, she was crying. Not for him, for the girls. They were trapped in a house with no doors. When he awoke, he didn't even have the strength to cry. Aisha entered the room wearing a blue dress, her hair styled, her face lightly made up. Her eyes were radiant. "Today's a celebration. Our daughter is 3 months in the womb." He tried to move his head. Couldn't. She leaned in and kissed his forehead. "You can rest now, Bako. You've given me everything I needed." And she left. The door left slightly ajar. On the porch, music began to play. Soft drums, low chants, the sound of dancing feet. In bed, Bako's chest rose and fell, slower, slower, until it stopped. The key turned in the lock with a dry click, and Aisha pushed the heavy wooden door inward, revealing a house now emptied of any presence but her own. She carried a light bundle in her arms, her eyes squinting against the bright morning light. The breeze that followed stirred the newly replaced curtains in the living room, bringing with it the scent of the flowers she had planted herself in the garden. Dark lilies, red hibiscus, herbs of uncertain origin that exhaled a sweet, unsettling aroma. She closed the door slowly, as if sealing something. Placing the bundle on the sofa, she walked through the house in silence, inspecting each room. The walls, once covered with portraits of the old family, now bore new artwork, tribal symbols, enigmatic female faces, figures with full bellies, and eyes that seemed to watch her even from afar. In the office, the desk that once belonged to Bako now displayed a small statue carved from dark wood, which she had brought from a village deep in the country. There were no more scattered papers, no photos of the daughters, no notebooks of bills. Everything now belonged to her. Everything was silence and order. The week before, Bako had been buried in the same grave as Adisa. The ceremony was brief, discreet. Few friends came, and those who did avoided meeting Aisha's gaze. She wore black again, a light veil covering part of her face. She received condolences with poise and grace. She did not cry. "Mr. Bako left everything very well arranged," the lawyer had said. "You're the sole direct beneficiary. Bank accounts, movable assets, properties, business holdings, everything is now in your name." She simply nodded. Now, returning to the house, Aisha ascended the stairs with gentle steps as one walks across conquered ground. She stopped before the girl's old bedroom. The door was ajar. She entered without knocking. The room felt larger now, colder. The beds were made, but empty. The toys had been packed, the clothes donated. There was no more scent of childhood in the air, only the faint perfume of incense burning discreetly in a corner. The girls had been sent away 3 days earlier, not to relatives. Those had vanished, spooked by rumors and Aisha's sudden decisions. She had arranged everything herself, a modest boarding school in the countryside, strict rules, severe discipline, and rare visits. They need to learn to grow up away from confusion. "This is no place for fragile children," she had told the driver assigned to the trip, handing him documents and a thick envelope. The older girl cried. The younger didn't understand what was happening until she was in the car. When they tried to say goodbye, Aisha only waved from the porch. "Be strong." Now, without childish voices, without light footsteps in the hall, the house was an echo of itself. But Aisha seemed content. She went back downstairs, lit another incense stick, this time in the center of the dining table, then sat in her favorite armchair by the window. There, she opened the bundle she had left on the sofa, an old cookbook, yellowed pages, a leather cover. Inside, handwritten notes in firm, ancient script. Herbs, spices, rituals, infusions to bend the spirit. She ran her fingers over the pages reverently. She smiled. After a few minutes, she stood, went to the kitchen, and prepared a thick broth. Garlic, ginger, roots ground with stone, a dark liquid carefully poured in at the end. She tasted it, closed her eyes. The flavor was dense, complex, almost bitter. She returned to the living room, sat again, and rested her hands over her now clearly rounded belly. The baby moved with strength, a sharp kick as if it recognized the silent victory echoing through the house. "We will reign," she whispered, her head slightly bowed. "No one will stop us." The sun was darkening slowly, filtered through heavy clouds stretching across the sky. Aisha did not turn on the lights. She preferred the twilight. In the shadows, she felt most alive. At a certain point, she rose and walked to Adisa's old bedroom. The door had been locked since the wife's death, but Aisha unlocked it with a small key pulled from a chain around her neck. The room was untouched, like an abandoned sanctuary. She entered, closed the door behind her, and walked to the mirror. She stared at her reflection for a long time. Then, taking a folded sheet from the closet, she covered the mirror completely. "The past no longer belongs here," she said quietly. On the vanity, she found an old lipstick. She applied it slowly, watching her movements even without the mirror. Then picked up one of the pillows and pressed it to her face for a moment, inhaling the lingering scent. "She's still here," she murmured, as if speaking to someone unseen. "But she'll leave." She exited the room and locked the door again, tossed the key out the corridor window as she passed. Later, on the porch, she sat beneath the dim glow of an old lamp. The night was warm, the wind whispered through the plants. She pulled out a small notebook, wrote down names, marks, symbols. She circled dates, underlined numbers. Her eyes, fixed on the pages, grew darker, as if absorbing everything around them. In the middle of the night, she awoke from a light nap to the sound of laughter. It wasn't hers. She looked around, eyes sharp. The sound was gone. "There's still something left in this house," she said to herself, "but I'll root it out." She returned to the bedroom, lay down with effort. Her belly shifted more than usual. as if the child inside were restless, as if it knew what had been done to bring it into being. Aisha stroked the stretched skin and closed her eyes. What came before was weakness. Now there is strength. In the final moment before falling asleep, she opened her eyes and looked up at the ceiling. And this isn't over. Outside, a crow landed on the iron gate and cawed once, cutting through the silence. Then the darkness closed over the house, like a warning or a beginning.